All three stories as they build and compound on each other, all of that has been pointing toward the absolutely absurd idea that any of us have ever thought we've been in the right all this time. He longed to fill his stomach, even with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one would give him anything. And then one day, he came to his senses. I want to pause here. He came to his senses. That's the right idea. That's what's going on in the text. But that's an English idiom, right? Like, this isn't about his sense of smell, an odor that reminded him of Dad. This is more like waking up to the moment. What's interesting, though, is the way that Jesus says this. He says, one day he returned to himself. That's the closest way we can translate the Greek here. And the core idea is that he finally remembered who he was. Like, he snapped out of this false self that he's been living out of, and in some sense, right here in this moment, at rock bottom, he becomes himself all over again. That's a really profound idea. At our worst, we're not ourselves. At our worst, that's not our core identity. At our worst, maybe, like here in this story, there's still a lot of work ahead to repair relationships that we might have damaged. But even at our worst, we can still return to the best of who we were meant to be. And so this kid comes to himself and he says, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? Here I am starving to death. This is crazy. I'll go back to my dad and I'll say, look, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm not even worthy to be your son anymore. Just give me a job. So he got up and he goes back to his father. But while he's still a long way off, his father sees him. He's filled with compassion. He runs to meet his son. He throws his arms around him and he kisses him. Here the son launches into his prepared speech, right? Like, Father, I've sinned against you. I've sinned against heaven. I'm no longer worthy to be your son. And even before he can get that all out, his father is calling the servants, bring the robe and put it on him, put a ring on his finger, sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf, kill it, let's have a feast and celebrate. The son of mine was dead, and he's alive again. He was lost, and he's now found. So they all began to celebrate. And even if we are unfamiliar with the story of Christianity, we know this story, right? Because it's beautiful. And that means it's been told 1,000 different ways. The Lion King, Good Will Hunting, Les Mis, probably even Home Alone if you stretch it far enough. They're all just the prodigal son retold, right? A child who loses himself, a child who remembers himself, a child who musters the courage to find his way home knowing his father is gracious. And yet a son who still is completely caught off guard by just how big grace can really be. I love this conviction Jesus has, that no matter how good we think God is, the experience of welcome is always better than we imagine. Here's a rubric that I use to govern all of my theology. If my image of God is not at least as good a parent as I am, if my image of God does not at least live up to the grace that I aspire to hold for myself and my kids, then my image of God is not only broken, it is less than worthless. First, because it falls short of the divine love that surrounds me all the time. But second, because if my image of God is not at least as graceful as I already am, then my image of God will slowly make me less graceful than I already am, and that is never the goal of life. Except here's the thing. We know God is like this, right? Somewhere in our bones, we know that God is good, that grace is real, that love can actually win in the end. And I think that by the end, even Jesus' critics that are sitting there grumbling before the stories begin are now even nodding along, saying, yes, of course God is like this father who welcomes his son home. But that means all of this is just set up to everything we've been reading so far. The lost sheep, the lost coin, the lost son, all of this is just preamble to the real story, which we haven't gotten to yet. See, parables are always, they're about the twist ending. the unexpected application of a surprising image. And I want to suggest there's nothing surprising about what we've read so far. Remember, Jesus told us about an absurdly good shepherd, and we all begrudgingly agreed, yeah, I hope God is like that. And then it was an overjoyed woman, and maybe that seemed a little too far to see God dance, but certainly not an image we could argue with. Now it's a father who is, honestly, he's just a good dad, one that we would all hope we would be, an image of God I don't think any of us could even begin to push back against. Yes, this is God. That means Jesus has just been slowly reeling us in, getting us into position so he can tell us the story he really wants to. A story about a father with two sons, and one of them is lost. Meanwhile, the older son is out in the field. But when he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. And so he called one of the servants. He's like, what is going on here? Your brother's come home, he replied. Your father has killed the fattened calf because he's back safe and sound. And the older brother became angry at this and refused to go in. Notice here, father goes to meet the younger son before he can return home. Now the father goes to meet the older son before he can walk away. Whether you avoid religion, whether you are too religious for your own good, grace will come and find you regardless. And yet he answered to his father, look, all these years I've been slaving away for you. I've never disobeyed you. You never gave me even a young goat so I could have a party with my friends. When this son of yours, who squandered your property on prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. By the way, notice here how this older brother has filled in a lot of details that aren't actually there in the story. Did the younger brother spend his money on prostitutes? I don't know, maybe. I do know this guy who hasn't talked to his brother for years doesn't know any more than I do, though. And yet he's filled in details to expand the story in ways that feed his own frustration, perceived slights that have a way of growing and cycling out of control unless we consciously rein them back in. It happens to all of us. But the father replied, my son, you're always with me. Everything I have is yours. You could have had a party whenever you wanted to. Today, though, we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive. He was lost and is now found. See, I think it's here, as Jesus repeats the final line, the one we heard with the sheep, and the one we heard with the coin, and now the one we hear with the son. I think it's here where we finally realize what's been happening all along in this chapter. The lost sheep wasn't the fairy tale. The 99 were. God spinning and dancing, making a spectacle of God's self in front of the angels. That wasn't the silly part of the story. The 9 coins that thought they were safe at home, that was. The son who asks for his inheritance before his father is dead, that's not the offense that catches God off guard. That's what we all do. That means the whole long chapter, all 3 stories as they build and compound on each other, all of that has been pointing toward the absolutely absurd idea that any of us have ever thought we've been in the right all this time. When the truth is, we have, every single one of us, everyone in this room, at some point found ourselves out in the field, missing the party, refusing to come inside because of who else was invited. And the question then isn't whether we're lost, we are. The question is whether we would stoop to attend the kind of party that someone like us would find themselves invited to. That's what the chapter's about. All the ways that we think we're the exception to the rule. And here's the thing. We hear the parable of the lost sheep, and we know God is like that. And then we hear the parable of the woman, and we recognize God is like this. We hear the story of this father, and somewhere deep inside, we absolutely understand, of course, the divine takes this posture toward all of us. Because we know in our bones, God is good. Grace is woven through the very fabric of the universe that we inhabit. That's not a secret. The secret to the parable is that sometimes, somehow, we think we're the only one that doesn't need it. And yet, the beautiful thing about this story is that Jesus says, even when that's true, even when we are resistant, even when we find ourselves like those religious leaders, grumbling at the company Jesus keeps, refusing to come inside, God will still go out and find us. God will leave the party to make his way toward us. God will invite us to come inside one more time for as long as we need God to.